Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All together, please. Om Jnana Timarandasya Ganandana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthavidam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Padakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Prijana Setam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karana Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapcha Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhana Sudadevi Pradamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Bhavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary is Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Canto 6, Chapter 4, entitled The Hamsa Guhya Prayers, text number 29. Please repeat. Yad Yan Niruktam Vakasa Nirupitam Diyashibir Va Manasotayasya Ma Bhut Swarupam Gunarupam Hi Tat Sa Vai Gunapaya Vishaga Lakshanaha Yadyan Niruktam Bakasa Nirupitam Diyashabheva Manasotayasya Mabhut Swarupam Guna Rupam Hi Tattat Savai Guna Paya Visaga Lakshanai Yadyan Niruktam Bachasa Nirupitam Diyashabheva Manasotayasya Mabhut Swarupam Gunarupam Hi Tattat Savai Gunapaya Vishaga Lakshanai. Okay. Mataji's, Vaishnavis. Yad yan niruktam vasij niruktam. Okay, please repeat. Yan. Excuse me. Yad, whatever. Niruktam, expressed. Vachasa, by words. Nirupitam, ascertained. Diya, by so-called meditation or intelligence. Akshibhihi, by the senses. Va, or. Manasa, by the mind. Uta, certainly. Yasya, of whom. Mabhut, may not be. Swarupam, the actual form of the Lord. Gunarupam, consisting of the three qualities. He, indeed, tat, that, saha, that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vai, indeed, guna apaya, the cause of the annihilation of everything made of the modes of material nature. Visarga, and the creation. Lakshana, appearing as. Translation, Srila Prabhupada. Anything expressed by material vibrations, anything ascertained by material intelligence, and anything experienced by the material senses or concocted within the material mind is but an effect of the modes of material nature, and therefore has nothing to do with the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord is beyond the creation of this material world, for He is the source of the material qualities and creation. As the cause of all causes, He exists before the creation and after the creation. I wish to offer my respectful obeisances unto Him. Please repeat. Anything expressed by the material vibrations, anything ascertained by material intelligence, and anything experienced by the material senses or concocted within the material mind is but an effect of the modes of material nature, and therefore has nothing to do with the real nature of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is beyond the creation of the material world, for He is the source of the material world, qualities and creation. As the cause of all causes, He exists before the creation and after the creation. I wish to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Purport Srila Prabhupada. One who manufactures names, forms, qualities, or paraphernalia pertaining to the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot understand him, since he is beyond creation. The Supreme Lord is the creator of everything, and this means that he existed when there was no creation. In other words, his name, form, and qualities are not materially created entities. They are transcendental, always. Therefore, by our material concoctions, vibrations, and thoughts, we cannot ascertain the Supreme Lord. This is explained in the verse, Atakshi Krishna Nama Di Na Bhaved Graham Indriyai. Prachetasa, Daksha, there herein offered prayers unto the transcendence, not to anyone within the material creation. Only fools and rascals think God a material creation. This is confirmed by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 9:11. Avajananti mam buddha manushim tanumasritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Therefore, one must receive knowledge from a person to whom the Lord has revealed himself. There is no value in creating an imaginary name or imaginary form of the Lord. Sripad Shankaracharya was an impersonalist, but nevertheless he said, Narayana Paro Vyaktat. Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is not a person of the material world. We cannot assign Narayan a material designation, as the foolish attempt to do when they speak of Dharidra Narayan, poor Narayan. Narayan is always transcendental, beyond this material creation. How can he become Dharidra Narayan? Poverty is found within this material world, but in the spiritual world, there is no such thing as poverty. Therefore, the idea of Dharidra Narayan is merely a concoction. Daksha very carefully points out that material designations cannot be the names of the worshipable Lord. Yad yan niruktam vachasa nirupitam. Nirukta refers to the Vedic dictionary. One cannot properly understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead merely by picking up expressions from a dictionary. In praying to the Lord, Daksha does not wish material names and forms to be the object of his worship. Rather, he wants to worship the Lord, who existed before the creation of material dictionaries and names. As confirmed in the Vedas, Yato vacho nivatante aprapya manasa saha. The name, form, attributes, and paraphernalia of the Lord cannot be ascertained through a material dictionary. However, if one reaches the transcendental platform of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes well acquainted with everything material and spiritual. This is confirmed in another Vedic mantra. Tam eva viditva ti mritum eti. If one can somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord, understand the transcendental position of the Lord, one becomes eternal. This is further confirmed by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 4:9. Janma karma tame divyam evam yogati tatpratah taktva deham punarjanma naitima metisarjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains to my supreme abode. O Arjuna, simply by understanding the Supreme Lord, one goes beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. Srila Sukadeva Goswami therefore advised Maharaj Parikshit in the Srimad Bhagavatam 215, Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari Shrotavya Kritatavyascha Smartavyas Chetata Bhayam. O descendant of King Bharat, one who desires to be free from all material misery must hear, glorify, and also remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supersoul, the controller, and the savior from all miseries. Mukam karochi vachalam bhangam laite girim yad kripa tamaham vande Sri Gurun dinatarinam yan yan niruktam vasasa nirukpitam diya shibe va manasotayasya ma bhut swarupam guna rupam hi tat tat savai guna paya vishaga lakshanaha. Anything expressed by material vibrations, anything ascertained by material intelligence, and anything experienced by the material senses, or concocted within the material mind, is but an effect of the modes of material nature, and therefore has nothing to do with the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord is beyond the creation of this material world, for He is the source of the material qualities and creation. As the cause of all causes, He exists before the creation and after the creation. I wish to offer my respectful obeisances unto Him. So, here Daksha is offering wonderful prayers to the Supreme Lord. King Prachanibhari asked his sons, the Prachetas, to become Prajapatis. So they performed austerities. They married Marisha, an Apsara, the daughter of Pramlochana, and she gave birth to Daksha. Daksha means expert. So, previous, as you know, he was creating the living entities, the categories of living entities, by his mind and by his semen. So by his mind he was creating those living entities that have subtle form. And though by his semen he was creating living entities that have gross body. So, but he was not satisfied. So he employed spiritual technology. Nowadays we have material technology. Yantra Vidhi, it is called. This was offered to Arjuna in the Mahabharata. There is a passage. Mayadhanava, who lives on Atala Vitala Sutala, the third down in the subterranean heavenly planets, he lives there, and he offered Arjuna Yantra Vidhi. And Krishna said, no, Arjuna, don't accept this. Don't accept this machine knowledge, this machine technology. Because why? What was the reason? Because this will reduce your dependence upon the Supreme Lord. Nowadays, Kali Yuga, we have so many gadgets, machinery, and people think, oh, we can manipulate the material energy and achieve perfection and happiness just by this technology. But it's becoming obviously a failure. The rivers are polluted, the air is polluted, the land is polluted by chemical fertilizers. People are going mad, making genetically modified tomatoes. They're doing everything they can with their yantravidi, their manipulation of the potencies of the material energy. But here, in the Bhagavatam, and particularly here, Daksha, we see, is employing spiritual technology, if you like. He's referring to the Supreme Lord. He's not satisfied with his service so far, creating the different living entities. He feels, I need more potency. So he employs spiritual technology. And that means he gets Shakti. He gets the blessing of the Supreme Lord. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, what's that verse? Krishna says, Pajanyo Sambhavat, Pajanyo Yagya Sambhavat, right? That grains come from rain. Rain comes from sacrifice. And sacrifices are prescribed in the Vedas. So sacrifice means, there's also that verse in the Brahma Samhita, Panthastu koti satavatsara sambragamyo. It says there that I worship the Supreme Lord who has conferred all the different potencies within the material energy. So the atheistic, those rebellious against the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, they want to manipulate those potencies that are available in material energy, in the atom, in the wind, in the air, in the fire, without reference to the Supreme Lord, for their own aims, for their own sense enjoyment, in a state of ignorance of the Supreme Lord. And because of this demoniac mentality, they're devoid of the guidance and the intelligence of that the Supreme Lord bestows. Instead, they rely on what is referred to here as material intelligence. That is intelligence, that means the ability to analyze and see things in the proper perspective. Also, intelligence in the third canto teachings to Kapil Dev, to Devahuti by Kapil Dev. Intelligence runs what is called the subconscious functions of the body. It puts us to sleep, it wakes us up, it runs our heart, it turns on our digestion, it tells us when to eat, when to take rest. Where the body is running not just on the conscious plane, but on the subconscious plane. So those functions are under the intelligence. We have intelligence in the conscious plane by which we analyze, and you will read there, and I recommend you to do so. Intelligence particularly is to analyze things and see things correctly. So material intelligence is devoid of reference to the actual state of reality. Reality is manifested from the Supreme Lord. It is, as we see in this verse, it is controlled by the Supreme Lord. It is sheltered, maintained by the Supreme Lord. It is the creation of the Supreme Lord, and eventually it is wound up by the Supreme Lord. So, how you can properly analyze things and see things in the correct perspective if you do not recognize and you do not understand how everything is emanating and being maintained by the Supreme Lord. If you miss the basic point, how can all your following analysis be correct and balanced? And therefore we see that the material energy is becoming extremely disturbed in Kali Yuga. Previously, people lived in harmony with nature, but now throughout the world, this infatuation with yantravidi, people are thinking that we don't have to live in harmony with the material nature, rather we'll make material nature live in harmony with our desire. We'll make the material nature subordinate to us and what we think is right and what we think is the real purpose of the material nature. Right? So this is the point of Krishna to Arjuna. If you take this yantravidi, you'll become so puffed up that you think you're the controller. But because you lack the real intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and you're just blindly following some blinkered view of analysis of the atom and molecule, then you think, because you lack the intelligence given by the Supreme Lord, then you will always be mistaken. You will always be in illusion. You will always be under the control of the Maya Shakti. And all your efforts are useless. So, we are not against technology. The Supreme Lord says, yes, you perform your prescribed duties properly and you'll get a response from the material nature. But if you don't prescribe your prescribed duties, the opposite will be the case. And so we see now the material nature increasing in volcanic activity, rains, terrible floods here and there, everything become disturbed, and the fools and rascals are putting chemicals in the air, right? Chemtrails and so on, and this will change everything. Instead of understanding that everything is controlled and owned by the Supreme Lord. Ishavasha idam sarvam yat kinchat jagadam jagat. Instead of relying on the Supreme Lord to control and regulate the activities through his extensions, the demigods and ultimately the supersoul, as mentioned here, instead of relying in that way, like a child relies on the father, the child wants to berate the father and says he doesn't exist, even though who can exist without a father and mother? Who can come into creation without a source? So Daksha recognizes this. Though he is Sakam devotee, he's got some desire through which he wants to serve the Supreme Lord, still he's a great devotee. And he is now evoking this mercy of the Supreme Lord to get the Shakti he needs, he feels he needs to fulfill his desire to serve the Supreme Lord in a particular manner, and a very important manner, by creating all the different categories of life. 800 million non-human, that is the plants, insects, animals, so on and so forth, demigods, the Asuras, Kinnaras, Kimparushas, Apsaras, Siddhas, Bhutas, Rakshasas, all the different categories of humanoid form and the human form upon this planet. He wants that potency, but he's not going into a laboratory and smashing atoms together or trying to explode them to find where the power is to do this. He's not a madman. He's not a fool and rascal. You think, oh, there is a Supreme Lord. Now let me get power from Him. So this is spiritual technology. Of course, it is actually bhakti. It's not technology in that sense. It is the way to evoke the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And that is the secret of existence, is it not? Doesn't Krishna say that? Yayatam mam prapadyante tam steva bhajya miyaham mama? That's right. All of them, as they surrender to me, I reciprocate accordingly. Everyone follows my path, O Arjuna. So that means, material or spiritual, you are actually reciprocating with the Supreme Lord and getting the result accordingly. Whether you recognize that and act in ignorance or act in ignorance, that doesn't change the formula. That everything is dependent upon the Supreme Lord, our existence, our maintenance. Everything, our source, is dependent on the Supreme Lord, whether you recognize that or not. But if your consciousness is devoid, if it is bahimukh, it is turned to the backwards, you turn your back to the Supreme Lord, where is the intelligence? It is therefore, Prabhupada translates very clearly, material intelligence, the material mind. However, if you act through spiritual knowledge, Gyan, Bhakti Gyan, if you know Vedic Siddhanta, then you will get the reciprocation and the intelligence to act properly. What is that verse? Hriday se Arjuna Tisthati. What? Matak smriti jnanam apohanam cha. That I am in the heart and I am regulating the consciousness of the living entity by my expansion, Vasudeva. Right? How is it done? How is spiritual intelligence? You've heard of the Chaturvyuha, right? Vasudeva, Shankarsan, Pradyumna, Adiruddha. So they are specifically expanded from Krishna to regulate thinking, Vasudeva, feeling, Shankarshan, that's Baladev aspect, so he's the devotee. Manmana, the consciousness, Vasudeva, Manmana, Bhavamad Bhakto, Shankarshan, the mood, the rasa within the consciousness, thinking, feeling, willing, Pradyumna, and then action. These things are all bestowed upon the living entity by the grace of the Supreme Lord. He is supervising the fulfillment of our thinking, feeling, and willing. Even in the thinking, feeling, and willing cannot be performed without the grace of the Supreme Lord. But in material ignorance, we think we are independent. I'm a bag of chemicals wandering upon the face of the earth, and these chemicals are creating me and my abilities and my ability to act consciously and choose what I do. And there's me, and there's this earth I'm sitting upon, walking upon, and that's it. Isn't it? Isn't that what we're being taught in the schools nowadays? You're a bag of chemicals that has somehow appeared after a big bang. And now that big bang combined the chemicals to make them conscious. Then some of these conscious cells, they decided, will learn how to fly, and some started jumping off the cliff, and some started walking around, and some stayed as microbes, and it all happened by chance. Sure, of course, everything is happening by chance. So this ridiculous philosophy is being taught in the ridiculous institutions they call educational institutions nowadays. The educational system has been grasped by the fools and rascals. And they're even making laws that you cannot teach anything about God in the schools. Don't teach them how everything, as these Hamsaguya prayers elucidate very clearly, everything is emanating, and as Lord Brahma summarized, right, that the Supreme Lord is the Supreme Controller. He is transcendental to the modes of material nature. He's the source of creation. He's the source of material energy. He is the uncaused cause of all personalities, Anadir Adir. He's the origin of all living entities, all spirit souls, but he himself has no cause. He is his self-sustaining, Abhigya Swarat, as the beginning of the Bhagavatam. He is his own cause. He is his own self-maintaining person. And he is Savakarana Karanam. He has introduced all these different potencies within the material creation and within the spiritual creation. And yet everything rests at every moment upon him. So everything is maintained by the remembrance of the Supreme Lord. This is a point of contemplation, that nothing for any instant, material or spiritual, exists in dichotomy or difference from the Supreme Lord. At every moment, the creation rests in every aspect upon the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the only intelligent way to fulfill your desire is by reference to that Supreme Controller. Is it not? Why look into the atom and molecule when you can look to the Supreme Lord? This is the modern day philosophy. It's called materialism and reductionism. You hear about materialism, but actually in Western philosophical terminology, materialism is the idea that there is only matter. That's it. There is nothing else other than this material energy that you can see. And reductionism means that we will understand this material energy by understanding the smallest unit, the atom, right? That's reductionism. That is rather like saying you can understand somebody by reducing everything down to the atoms and molecules in their body. If you understand one of their atoms and their molecules, then you'll understand everything about that person. Does that seem reasonable? You can understand this amazing creation if you understand one atom. That's like saying you can understand a billionaire if you can understand one rupee. It doesn't work, does it? It doesn't compute. So even on their terminology, it is foolish endeavor. Actually, there's so much more. The material scientists, they analyze the material elements, and then they say, they analyze the material elements, and from these material elements we will become God. This is also, there are many so-called secret societies, and they think that by knowledge, by manipulating the material energy, eventually we'll become gods. Because when we understand the atoms and molecules, and the DNA atoms and molecules, then we'll be able to manipulate the DNA and overcome all disease and death. They do not understand that life is not dependent on your DNA, rather it is the soul. So ultimately, though they manipulate the material energy in a search for mastery so that they can exploit and enjoy that material energy in ignorance of the Supreme Lord, they fail. Because there is more than just atoms and molecules. They want to write, it's a very common thing you may have heard, the grand unified field theory. They want to write an equation that includes everything, right? That includes all the different forces. For example, electromagnetism, gravity, the strong and the weak nuclear force. They've found out so many forces. So they want to unify these all into one equation. They call it the GUT, the Grand Unified Theory. Make a big equation that ties all these different aspects that they are investigating together. But how you can unify all the energies if you don't know them all, right? If you don't know everything, how will you find the linkage between them? If you only know 4 aspects of material or 5 aspects in the material energy, and you think that by combining this will be the ultimate explanation of everything, if you think that way, then, but there's more going on than you have perceived, then how are you going to come out with an accurate unified field theory? So, and then they work into the realms of mental speculation. They will fail, of course, and they will fail for 1,000,000 billion years with this attitude, because we already know what the unified field theory is, right? That is Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir Govinda, Sarvakarana Karanam. That is not an equation in a physics science book, because physics and science, which all use mathematics, is just one aspect of reality. We've given the example before that just like one aspect of my life is my bank account, not your bank account. One aspect of my life is my bank account. So you can look at it and see money's coming in here, money's going out there, and mathematically calculate it and say, I know about him now. I know everything. Can you say that? No, you don't know what I'm doing with the money. You don't know my motivations. You don't know my personality. You don't know my moods. You don't know my aims and objectives. But one aspect of my life, yes, is mathematical. But all reality is not bound by mathematics. The Supreme Lord, as we see in this sloka, is the origin of these things, but He Himself is not bound by them. The Supreme Lord creates material logic by His potency, but He is beyond material logic. If you say that by mathematics we will reveal everything, 1 and 1 makes 2, 2 and 2 makes 4, or something like that, then you are saying that mathematics is the supreme. Because the supreme, the superior, reveals the inferior, does it not? The father reveals the child. I reveal my bank account, unhappy as it is, to you. But you cannot. I have mastery. The superior reveals the inferior. So if you think that by different material, mathematical calculations, whether they're in biology, physics, chemistry, or whatever, if you think that mathematics is the ultimate principle, you're saying mathematics is the God. Mathematics is ruling this material energy. But no, mathematics is an aspect of reality. But mathematics and logic, they are subject to the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord can manipulate everything according to his desire. He is not bound by the principles that he has created. Rather, they rest upon him. So, of course, in the field of material intelligence and speculation, then there are those that not just go into the material energy, but as this verse, and Prabhupada expounds in the purport, they also use this speculative tendency and they apply it to the Supreme Lord. And this is specifically condemned here, is it not? The Supreme Lord, whatever is speculated about him, right, he is void. He's a big nothing in the sky. Or he's a big field of energy. Or maybe he's a big angry man with a beard and a book writing down all the bad things that you've done and sending you to hell forever. Yes, but he loves you at the same time. He's created you and you made a big mistake in one life and now you go to hell forever. Or you can become God yourself by taking LSD. Right? This was the isn't it? By taking LSD, you'll become God. You'll see Lord Shiva. And he'll say, why don't you become God? I think I'll do that. I'll jump off the top of the building just to prove my divinity. So this is the material concoction. Instead of going to the material, atoms and molecules, people also go to the philosophical side. And they have what Prabhupada sums up as man-made religion. So they're looking at matter and analyzing, and then they're thinking, speculating about spirit, and it's all man-made speculation. There's God on one side, and there's devil on the other, and they're fighting each other, and you're a spirit soul, you can go to God or you can go to the devil, and God is having a hard time with the devil. Sometimes the devil's winning. It's like a football match or something, and then God attacks and he sends his son and he sacrifices and this happens and that happens. Mental speculation about spirit, not only matter. So it's stated here, this is all useless. It is all called kusidanta. Erroneous conclusions. So through erroneous conclusions, whether it's that matter is the source of everything, or that only matter can be manipulated, or that spirit is created by matter, or that spirit is somehow like this or that. This world is tough, therefore the Supreme Lord must be angry. All this mental speculation is useless if you actually want to know the absolute truth, on the terms of the absolute truth. So this verse is pointing out that the absolute truth exists independent of our scientific calculation, of material mind, of our mental speculation. As Prabhupada quoted there, Savai Pumsam Paradharma, what's that? Sorry? What was it? Nabhavad Greyam Indriya. The Supreme Lord is beyond the capability of your material mind and your material senses. But he exists independent. So, well then how will I ever find it? How will I ever understand the absolute truth? How will I ever find that Supreme Lord? I have no instrument because I only have this material mind and this material body. Is that correct? Don't nod your head. No, you have a perfect instrument. You have a perfect instrument that is of the same quality, the same nature as the Supreme Lord. So you don't need to speculate about Spirit. What you have to do is experience Spirit directly. That is the purpose of human life, to use the soul. This material body, this material mind is a jacket for the soul and the consciousness of the soul. And the soul is bewildered by identification with this material body. But if the soul takes instruction from the Bhagavatam and the great prayers like the Hamsa Guya, the prayers of the personified Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, and this is the actual process, dharmam tu shakshad bhagavat pranihitam. Shakshad. The actual codes of dharma, religiosity, true religiosity, jiva dharma, the nature of the soul, the nature of reality, they are shakshat, directly enunciated by the Supreme Lord. And they are manifest through, in this particular time, through Veda Vyas, in the form of the Vedic literature. He compiled the Vedic knowledge, created the Vedas, or rather wrote them down, and then he created the Puranas, the Itihasas, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana. And these are the introduction to understanding the material and spiritual creation. And it's stated here in this slok that the Supreme Lord is beyond this material creation. So this is the primary point in understanding reality and the Supreme Lord. That Supreme Lord is transcendental to the material creation. And therefore it is by His grace He projects knowledge into the material energy for us conditioned souls, by which we can overcome this speculative tendency. And rather than speculating and contemplating in ignorance and separation from the actual Supreme Lord, we should use our intelligence and our ability to contemplate and meditate and consider. We should use that not on a speculative analysis of spirit and matter, but rather upon the knowledge that He has given. Right? We have to use intelligence. That is natural. So we contemplate and think about things. So what we should use, those tendencies, abilities to contemplate the Vedic literature. We shouldn't read it just like a book, but these great prayers, just like now we're having a discussion. We're talking about these great, wonderful prayers. The Hamsa Guya prayers are so wonderful. You should study them every night before you go to bed. You should get immersed and consider. And then by the grace of the Supreme Lord, you will gain enlightenment. As Prabhupada says here at the beginning, one who manufactures names, forms, qualities, or paraphernalia pertaining to the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot understand Him, since He is beyond the material creation. So, we need access directly to the Supreme Lord. So we sing every morning, right? What is that 7th sloka of the Samsara prayer? Sakshad Hari. The Guru is Sakshad Hari. So that personality who has become absorbed in contemplation and thereby by the grace of the Lord has received the reciprocation of enlightenment, he is Sakshad Hari. Mahat Sevam Dwara Mahor Vimuktes. That the Mahatmas absorbed in Seva Bhav and realization thereby of the Supreme Lord, they are the door to liberation from this speculative tendency, the material energy. And by serving them and contemplating their instructions, what is that sloka? Mahajyena Katasvapanta. The Vedic literatures are there. They're highly complex and difficult to somebody who has no teacher. Tadvidi pradipatena pariprashnena sevaya. If you approach the representative, the realized personality of Godhead, who has by his sadhana, by his bhava, realized the nature of the Vedic literature, and you serve that personality and you give oral reception, then you will realize the same Supreme Lord. Because you have the perfect instrument to realize the Supreme Lord, and that is you. You, the soul. You are the perfect instrument to realize the Supreme Lord. The soul is angsa. Mavai vamsa jiva, okay, jiva bhuta. Prakriti, they're struggling with the material energy. But instead of struggling as an angsa, as a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, put your consciousness on the Supreme Lord, and you will realize Him directly within your own heart, within your own consciousness. And that is what the soul is made for. The soul is meant for that yayatam, to reciprocate with the Supreme directly, and to take the blessings of the Supreme, that just like a father loves to bless the children. So Daksha is becoming more than a spirit soul in one sense. He's developing incredible potencies. Lord Brahma is more than just a little spirit soul. He's given amazing potencies. And Srila Prabhupada, we have direct evidence. He wrote so many wonderful literatures, gave wonderful lectures, instructions. How is it possible? What is that sloka in the Chaitanya Charitamrita? Natara Parvatana. Without the blessing of Krishna, nobody can speak the absolute truth. That's why. So Prabhupada is speaking because he has the Shakti. What is that sloka, do you know? Krishna Shakti Nahi Tara Pravatana. Very good. Good Pandit there. I'll blame that on my cough, my lack of memory. Krishna Shakti Vina. Without that, Nahi Tara Pravatana. You cannot speak. So look what Srila Prabhupada did. How is it possible that he could translate and wrote commentary and summarize all the Vedas and all the great acharyas in his purport? How could he do that? Krishna Shakti. And Prabhupada used to read his books and he said, I have not written these books. Krishna has written these books. And what does Krishna tell Arjuna? Look, this battle is already over and done with, but Arjuna, by my arrangement, but you can be an instrument. Right? So this is spiritual technology. To become the laboratory instrument of the Supreme Lord. But not made of matter, but of an enlightened spirit soul, who understands that the Supreme Lord is transcendental, as stated here, is nothing to do with material energy, and He is the cause of all causes, the source. And He is the fit object for contemplation and inquiry. What does the Vedanta Sutra say? What does Vyasadeva when he's summarizing the Vedic knowledge? Atato Brahma, Brahma Jignyas, right? And then the next sloka, Janmadhyasyata. That Brahma, that Supreme, is the source of everything. So the Vedic literature directs us to that contemplation, that meditation on the Supreme Lord. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam, contemplation of the Supreme Lord. As Prabhupada says, the name, form, qualities and pastimes, they exist beyond mental speculation. And if you want to have a man-made religion, this idea, science religion, this religion, that religion, all composed by faulty conditioned living entities, then you'll just remain in ignorance. But if you contemplate the Vedic literature, Veda means knowledge, and you perform sadhana, and you serve the Guru, serve the sadhus, and you satisfy them by hearing and chanting, then you also will become more than a spirit soul in that sense. You'll become perfectly enlightened. Why? Because a finger becomes more than a finger when it's connected to the body. Correct? But if the finger is disassociated to the body, what's the use of it? But if the finger joins the body, then he carries the strength of the body. So, the Bhagavatam is meant to redirect this Kali Yuga civilization and give them the direction towards the contemplation of the Supreme Lord. And particularly recommended is hearing and chanting. What do we like to chant? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So a question, why do you talk so much? Because Krishna is unlimited. All right, thank you very much. Can you stay for the question? Don't worry. Sri Krishna, love Vishnu, is creator of all. Nothing exists besides him. He creates all living entities. Before him there was nothing. Gita says the soul is eternal, is unborn and eternal, has no birth nor death. Question: how is the soul eternal and is also created if an ever-existing soul? Good question. We hear that the soul is the creation of the Supreme Lord, yet the soul is also eternal. So this is a misunderstanding of the word eternal. You're thinking eternal in terms of material sequentiality. That things in the material world are created at a certain point in material time, and thereby they become subject to destruction within material time. So therefore I have experienced creation in those terms by my material entanglement. So when we hear that the soul is created, we think it was created at a certain time in the spiritual world. But Sriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kaltaravosh Druma. This at the end of the Brahma Samhita, Lord Brahma explains that material time, material sequentiality is absent on the transcendental form. So everything can exist eternally and yet be created. Now that, like we said earlier, that's difficult because we are now bound by material logic. Our consciousness is not purified and thereby properly grasp eternality. And therefore, because of this conditioned pollution of the consciousness, we think that creation and eternality are contradictory. But everything, understand it, you have to contemplate this. This is what the great sages do. We are talking about contemplation. They sit and they meditate on these particular points of Siddhanta with faith, and they get realization by this austerity, this concentration on different aspects of reality. So what is the point we should contemplate? The point that we should contemplate on this is that everything that is created by the Supreme Lord within the eternal atmosphere is eternal. So if you contemplate that for 1,000 years, you may gain a glimpse of understanding. But that's the fact, that the material conditions cannot be applied to understanding the transcendental conditions or qualities. Therefore, we have to use the purified consciousness of the soul upon the spiritual platform to gain realization of it. Do you understand? We can't use our material conceptions of past, present and future and apply them to the transcendental world, because this Kala Shakti, which is the expression of Lord Shiva, is only operative on the material platform. As it says here, everything in the spiritual world is transcendental to the material qualities. So creation in the spiritual platform is eternal. It is not bound by the material time factor. So contemplate that and gain some intuition. But realize that until you are purified to properly understand, as Prabhupada says here, the Nabhaved Greyamindriya, that the transcendental world is beyond the grasp of the conditioned material senses. So therefore, contemplate the statements of the Shastra and the great Acharyas, and by their grace, gain intuition, knowledge within your consciousness of eternality. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you too.